Welcome to the Board Game Marketing Podcast. Let's cue the intro. This is the #1 podcast to learn marketing strategies for your board game. Whether you're just starting on your first game or an experienced designer, you've come to the right place. My name is Nalin, and let's talk marketing for your game. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Board Game Marketing Podcast. In this podcast, I interview creators who have successfully funded their ideas on Kickstarter to learn more about their journey to launch and help you formulate your own plan. I also bring on experts in the tabletop space to talk about all the facets of marketing and building your game publishing company. If you've been listening for a while now, you know that I hold nothing back. So in these episodes, be prepared to hear me ask the hard questions and really get down to the finer details. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Board Game Marketing Podcast. Today, we're really lucky to have both Julie and Adrian on the show, and I'm so excited for everything that they're going to be sharing with us today about Mantis Falls. So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us,
Nalin.
Thank you.
Perfect. So I'd love it if you could kind of tell us about, yourself, how you got started, and also about Mantis Falls before we get into the details here about how you marketed for it.
All right, so I'll kind of back it up to about 5 years ago. Adrian and I were in a long distance relationship, and board gaming was a really big part of that relationship. We were trying to figure out ways to play games with each other from afar, and Adrian and I both sort of felt that all of our games, when we were playing over speakerphone, there wasn't a lot that we were talking about with each other while we were playing, and so sort of in a haze of when he was, at the university, his first year teaching at a university, and he was finishing up finals and grading and everything. He sort of had this idea for this game. He called me one night. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and he was supposed to be grading. And he was like, I still have a lot to do on grading, but I've had this idea for a board game. And sort of loosely described it to me. And I kind of thought he was maybe like losing his mind a little bit. And, we don't make board games. And so I was like, okay, yeah, sounds cool. Yeah, sounds fun. And then he basically, I guess, stayed up for like 2 nights straight, working on, components for this game. And the mechanics, and made a prototype, brought it home to me. We played it, and I was like, God, this is the best game I've ever played. It took me a few minutes to kind of get used to the style because I'd never played anything like it. And then I realized that it just had so many of the things that I loved about games. So we really liked hidden trader games, but there were a couple of things that we didn't love about them. So things like, resistance and all of that. The sort of witch hunt dynamic of it, of where you're just going to like point a finger and accuse, and whoever's the loudest person in the room usually gets heard the most. And then the other part of it is that, very frequently the actual strategy is just convincing people that you're not lying. Whereas, the strategy here was, if you're going to betray me, you actually have to plan and execute the betrayal using tools and cunning and all of that. And so it sort of had everything. And then it was also, for the two of us, for 2 players. And so I was sort of floored. I thought this was, he'd lost his mind and was sleep deprived and was working on this thing where sort of like, I don't know if you've ever watched Parks and Recreation, but it was going to be like Cones of Dunshire, where, he shows up with this game. He's like, okay, there's these cones, and then there's this master cone, and then this is nothing, right? But yeah, this game is nothing. And it was going to be like a crazy mad lark. And it actually turned out to be, I was like, gosh, I can't think of another game that's like this. I started doing the illustrations for it probably about like maybe the first or second day that I played it. It took us, because we were, raising kids and have full-time jobs. And so it took us a long time to put it together exactly the way that we wanted. And then also to finish all of the illustrations. There's a lot of cards. And so that was, it probably took about 3 years to kind of really nail down everything about the game. And then the last year plus was figuring out how to even launch a game into the world. So that's basically it, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's really great. Thank you for kind of walking through that, like how this came from just, your own kind of need, both of you, to kind of stay connected and play games online, and just kind of figuring out ways to create a game that not only meets that need, but also meets the needs of, that's on the market of betrayal games and type of game, and kind of seeing what the other games are like and kind of doing a different angle, different pivot of it. So that actually brings me to my next question for you both. Like, when you started creating this game, right? When were you kind of like showing it off to people and kind of asking what the feedback was? And did you kind of take that information and make tweaks? Like, how did that work? That product market fit type of period?
Yeah, so that's it was tough kind of to figure out how to take all that feedback and stuff. So when it first started, it was very much like she was describing, just sort of a big surge of just feeling like this need to get this thing out there and create it, with no real clear plan of necessarily who was going to play it, or, if anybody. And then I was able to share it right away with people really close to me, like Julie, my son, people that were very willing to just sort of like get invested in the process of really understanding the game. And that was extremely helpful. That's like, I don't know what on earth we would have done without that, where we could just like play test and refine in sort of a low stress environment and have people that were really committed to it, to the process of it. And then especially this game, it's a little unconventional in terms of understanding your motivations, what you're trying to do. And it's also really a game for gamers, right? In our own social circles and stuff, there's only so many people you can really call upon that have a lot of experience playing advanced games and things. So we tried a lot of different things where we would share it with people that maybe this was the first complicated-ish game they've ever played, but they were doing it just because, they were our friends or something. I would say that started, I don't know, maybe after 8 months of sort of our own internal production. And then at that point, it's just sort of a matter of like every new person you talk to, sort of trying to gauge their interest of like, oh, maybe this would be someone who'd be willing to try it. And then, of course, like trying to take their feedback, but then also consider the fact that, the random people that we're showing this to aren't necessarily our target audience. Like, there were some people where it's like I would try to explain, like, you play a card and it does wounds to this thing that you're facing. And just that principle was like completely over their head because they'd never played anything other than Monopoly or something. So
yeah, there were a lot of disheartening moments where, because we actually weren't a big part of the wider gaming community. And so when we were sharing it with friends and family, we're like, it's good, right? Like we really like it. And they were like, I don't know, it seems really complicated. And then when we actually shared it with people, once we started to broaden our community over these 5 years, and we started sharing it with other game designers and other more serious gamers and stuff, they were like, oh yeah, like this reminds me of Battlestar Galactica, and this part of this mechanic reminds me of this other game that I've played a bunch of, and they just picked it up no problem. So that we probably spent a fair bit of time sort of self-doubting just because we were showing it to the wrong people.
Yeah, well, I mean, and they would all be very supportive, but it took us a little bit of time to sort of figure out, like, even though all of our friends and family are going to offer to play it, the people we really want to show it to are people who, are in the market for it, that would actually understand a game like this. And so then we started branching out into that. There were playtest game nights that we have that are local, where we could go and just meet people that were strangers to us, but play games with them. We would play test their game, they would play test ours. And those were all really useful. I mean, I think the thing that was most useful was actually just seeing what they found confusing, more than anything. And of course, we really wanted them to like it, and we would get positive feedback, and that would be encouraging. But the thing that was most useful was just seeing when people didn't fully understand something, whether it was just the language of the card or the language of the rules, but also the strategy. If there were parts where it's like the strategy felt so ingrained for us. And then we sort of saw the ways that you sort of want to help push people in the right direction so that it's not a total mystery to them what they're really trying to accomplish. Yeah. Yeah, we went to some pretty big playtest. I went to like Metatopia, which is this sort of big playtesting thing in New Jersey, and was able to play with a few people.
We held a big playtest with a bunch of friends here at a brewery. Got permission from the brewery to kind of open it up after hours, and so we sort of like gradually increased our circle. And then, I mean, the big ones were we showed it at PAX in January. Got a lot of people to play it, and it was really positive. People were really stoked about it, which was wonderful. And then we started sending out copies to reviewers, and that was sort of our big test. Is sort of like, okay, we give this to a reviewer. They have no reason to try to sugarcoat anything. And what are they going to say? And so we got our first review back probably like November of last year from Sequential Planet. And I mean, it was like a blowout positive. He was saying it's like one of the best 2-player games he's ever played. And so that was the moment where finally we were like, okay, maybe we've actually done this. These are people who aren't gonna, they're not gonna lie. They're not gonna, don't give everyone good reviews, and liked this. And so that was the point at which we started feeling like it was actually a promising venture.
Yeah, I love that you went through this journey where, you were trying to kind of make this fit with the friends and families and getting them to play test it, to kind of hone it. And then it just wasn't the right fit. I think a lot of the kind of journey that you went through was kind of the journey of finding kind of the right audience too, and kind of the importance of that, right. Like, I think you mentioned, Adrian, like the right target audience that you're looking for a game like this. And I know that when, we actually started meetings on one of the groups online on Facebook, that was kind of one of the things that you were trying to really hone in on, both of you actually. Mm-hmm. And I remember you doing a lot of different experimentations, a lot of different testing, a lot of different just trial and error throughout that pre-launch phase, just to figure out who your audience was and kind of what they gelled with. I'd love it if you kind of talk us through some of that, because I know both of you like really have that experimentation hat on and really went hard with just trying everything.
Basically everything in this whole process of launching the Kickstarter has been experimentation, basically. Like, because, we're neither of us have any experience. We have, hardly any experience building businesses other than, being employees of businesses, but then also, finding a greater community. So the playtest night that we used to have we have the developer playtest nights here in town, and that was actually started by Kyle and Maddox of Keymaster Games, who did Parks. If you know of that one, beautiful illustrations. They actually were nominated for the Golden Geek Award for best illustrations for their game. And they put together, they sort of like trailblazed here in Athens, being an indie game developer. They put together that playtest night, and it was there that we started talking with other people who, either Kickstarter or pitched to publishers, and started kind of just the worm in our ear of like, there are a lot of things to consider. Everything is an experiment. Like, how do you market? How do you, where do you find your audience? How do you find reviewers? Everything is, and nobody has the exact right answer to any of these things. And so the really great thing that they put us onto is actually the group that you and I are in, and how I even found out about you was the indie tabletop Kickstarter advice. And that was where we started, hearing some of the opinions people had about all kinds of aspects of this process. And then, and then sort of reaching out and trying different things in marketing, trying different things in audience cultivation. And that was, I think, really trying to figure out how to find the people who were going to want our game, figuring out the Facebook ads and stuff like that, understanding how to narrow down that group, probably helped us understand a lot about who our audience was, what they were looking for, how many people want a game like this. And I mean, honestly, before that, we didn't even know how many people were going to want something like this in their lives. Because I mean, hidden trader games can be a hit or miss with some people. Some people absolutely hate them. And then, how many people are going to want a 2-player version of that? People are used to being for 8 players. So there's definitely, the trial and error was profound with this process. We can speak more to the Facebook ads, but is there any particular part of that you would like us to speak to from our end?
yeah, kind of off the top of my head, for people who are new to game design and kind of just figuring out their audience, like what kind of things worked for you and what kind of things didn't work for you, and kind of what kind of advice would you give to people just getting started, right?
Well, I think we were pretty fortunate in that our audience is basically people who look like us. And for us, the game was developed out of a need, which was we're a couple and we want a game that's highly immersive and interactive. And we want to be able to play Hidden Trader for 2 players. And so it was like very, very early on, some of our friends who really took to the game were couples with kids who couldn't go to playtest nights or to game nights and stuff with their friends, who also love Hidden Trader games. And we're like, okay, so, people in relationships is probably a big one, especially for 2-player games. And then, people who already like things like Battlestar Galactica, Shadows over Camelot, Resistance, Avalon, Werewolf, all of those are going to be sort of our target demographic. Because there are those folks who don't like Hidden Trader games. So we want someone who likes Hidden Trader. We want someone who wants something that's 2 players. And honestly, I think probably the pandemic even maybe helped us out a little bit here, because people can't gather in large groups right now easily, or as easily as at least as they did before. So the fact that came along and people were like, oh gosh, I'm never going to be able to play one of these games for the next year. And we were offering them this option of here's a 2 to 3 player Hidden Trader game. It sort of was was weirdly good timing. Not that we want to take advantage of that at all.
You're saying in terms of finding our audience for like Facebook ads and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. For that we did, like she said, we sort of started with the sort of standard, like people who are into Kickstarter, right? We did the sort of the audience selection. We narrowed it to people who liked strategy games, card games, all sort of the typical things. And we were trying to get some traction with Facebook ads. We weren't spending very much money. We were just trying to understand how it was working at all. And we were doing okay. We were settling in at one point. We set up the whole pixel and everything where we were registering when people were clicking on the link. We were registering if they were signing up for our mailing list. And we were doing okay, but not great. And then we did the next piece of advice that people would recommend, where we did the lookalike audience based upon the people who were actually converting onto our mailing list. And then that did really well. That suddenly shot up our performance about 3 times. And so we don't get access to the data. We don't know what that lookalike audience was exactly. We don't know what formula Facebook was, figuring out for us, but it's completely transformed our success rates.
Got it.
Yeah, that machine learning is powerful stuff.
Yeah, definitely with those lookalike audiences. So along with advertising, right, and building your community with advertising, what kind of things were you also doing beyond this to grow, build, and also communicate with your audience? Because it was a big audience that you started off with too.
It's funny because we would pitch it. We would say to people, hey, we have 1,200 people on our mailing list. Is that enough? And some people would be like, no, you need to have at least 2,000. So it didn't feel at the time when we were launching like it was actually a big audience. But it was mostly Facebook ads in terms of paid advertising. We were doing a lot of social media stuff. So we did, a lot of Instagram posts, a lot of, we created a Facebook group. We had a Facebook page. Cross-promoted those. And then, there were a lot of those sort of incidental things that sort of feel like they don't add up to much. But, we did one giveaway online, and then we did the big thing probably, other than advertising, the biggest thing that really grew our audience was going to PAX South. So when we won the spot at their indie showcase, we got flat over 500 people on our mailing list in a weekend, which was incredible. And those people have actually, so many of the people that converted later on said, I saw you at PAX, and I've been waiting for this. So that was pretty big. And I think that those people, I think there's just no replacing the human touch, meeting people in person and actually forging some kind of relationship with them. And as much as that can carry over to the online element, we try and be very, very interactive with our backers and our audience so that they feel like we're really there with them. We're not a company, we're people. And I think that probably really helped grow the audience, not treating them as though they're, potential buyers, but that they're, thank goodness for them, they're coming along this journey with us.
Yeah, talk to me more about that, being interactive with backers and your audience. A lot of people who are kind of new to game design and kind of struggling with their, building the community for launch, they don't know what to say pretty much, or like what kind of content to release. Like, so what were you guys doing there?
Right. Well, we were coming at this, like our goal when this all began, this is going to be a roundabout way of answering your question, but like for me, I've always wanted to release something creative. Like I've made music my whole life. I've written, stories. Like there's like a lot of people just feel the need to sort of create things, and everything I'd ever done, I would just end up, putting in a drawer or something, and not sharing it with the world really. And from the beginning, this game felt like maybe it could be like that. And then after a little bit of time with it and watching it grow and the amount of attention that I was putting into it throughout the development process, it really shifted over to like, this is exciting. This will be the thing that I really share with the whole world. And so by the time we were, trying to promote things on Instagram and try to get people excited about our Kickstarter and trying to send the game to reviewers, we really had this genuine feeling of like, we're not trying to make money. We're not thinking about launching a company exactly. We just really invested a lot of ourselves into this, and we want people to experience it. And I think we just sort of kept that up in terms of our communications with people, that when people ask questions on our Kickstarter or something as it was beginning, even if we were busy and even if we didn't always have, the amount of time necessarily to respond to all of those all the time, like as we responded to them, it really felt genuinely like, this is just great for us that we're talking about this game, and we love that people are asking questions about the strategy of it. And so I think for us, it sort of came easy to relate on just the level of, we're just really genuinely grateful that you guys are a part of this and that we can talk about it and stuff. And I don't, we don't know, we haven't tried everything else, but I feel like that worked for us. Because we just really meant it this time. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think if we were to ever release something in the future where it was like, I guess we just need to publish a game this year, here's this thing, I think in our case, it's relatively uncommon for a couple or a single person to be responsible for the entire thing. So like a lot of people will hire an artist, right? And then pay the artist and then hire a graphic designer. I mean, everything here was just the two of us. So it felt very, very personal and very, like we were just so deep in it, and every question had an answer because we'd talked about that, why did you choose this, illustration, or what about this style? We talked about all of that stuff at length. So I think so much of the interaction was, we were just so flabbergasted and excited that people were interested at all. That we were like, yes, oh my God, we'll gladly talk to you about this. And I think that, it led us to, I mean, some of these people that we're doing like the custom ally cards, which was one of our backer tiers. And some of these people, like I'm illustrating their loved ones, their pets, their, I like people that are important to them or animals that are important to them in their lives, and hearing about their lives from the inside. And then, sending them an illustration and getting feedback and all this stuff. And I feel like I'm actually like a part of their lives too. So I think the big thing is that it can't just be a one directional relationship. I'm just as excited to hear their thoughts and opinions as I am to talk to them about it. And so I think that the idea that this is a journey we're sort of all going on together, sort of helped it feel more like a conversation, more like they are now a part of our team instead of like they're passive observers of this campaign.
Yeah, I think this also brings us back to kind of when you started off this kind of podcast, this conversation too, where this came because you and Adrian wanted to kind of stay in touch, wanted to be in touch, wanted to have that relationship, that connection. And it's kind of the same way that, you know, the way you're talking to your backers, right? You want to have that connection, and then they're putting their loved ones, their pets as cards in the game, and that's that type of connection too. So it really speaks to just knowing that audience and just really finding people just like yourselves too, and being able to just interact with them in that way. So I love how it all just kind of ties up and kind of connects together in this big puzzle piece.
It seems like it seems like a lot of people were really endeared by this idea of trust, you know, and that it's a vein that carries out through your entire life. And it's weird because it kind of, there are like these ripple effects of like, okay, so this is a game about trust, and it's very deeply immersive and interactive. And it's the idea is you're with this other person, and you really have to look them in the eye and understand something about them and communicate. And it seemed like all of the people that were really endeared by that notion that jumped on this with us were people who were actually excited to look somebody else in the eye and communicate. And it's sort of like, it was like meta, you know, levels of things. And, all of, you know, so many people were, you know, we're first time publishers, you know, we're untested entities. And even though we had reviewers and we had awards and stuff like that, people were so not only trusting of us, but like rooting for us. I mean, they hardly knew who we were. And it seems like that the theme of the game actually took on almost its own life in the theme of our campaign was, you know, let's all just actually be in this, you know, together. And it was amazing the way that people were rooting for us. It just felt so heartening at a time where, like, in the middle of a pandemic, to feel that human interaction from that kind of a distance was really something.
Yeah, I really saw that in the comments people were leaving, even just on your personal like Facebook pages and when you were posting about the games too. So I really kind of really see that shine through from your backers too. Mm-hmm. I know that throughout the beginning stages of the game, you were trying to figure out kind of what positioning or what tagline or kind of how to pitch the project in like a really short and concise manner. How did you decide on, you know, the short tagline that you have now for the game?
Right. So the tagline is like life, a cooperative game that's only really cooperative sometimes. And the origin of that was probably the first that I came up with that the very first night. That as Julie was describing the origin of the game and this idea of wanting to create interactivity and something where we had to engage and communicate and stuff as we were doing it, that quickly led to this idea of this sort of sometimes cooperative aspect of that maybe we're working together, maybe we're not, and we have to actually really figure that out through our conversations and our plays. And the turning point where I got excited about it was just in sort of realizing the obvious point of just how much that's like life in general, that so much of what we do in life is focused on needing people and trying to address what to do about that need. And every different person we meet in every different context, we sort of try to gauge how much they're on our side, right? And they're trying to do the same thing about us, and that we make sacrifices to that end and stuff. And so that struck me. And then the idea of that this is like it's that we go through it and we always form these alliances and partnerships and friendships and cooperate in so many ways, but at the same time, you're still always ultimately doing this alone. And so that idea became the tagline very quickly and felt really intrinsic to the development of the game, that the whole thing felt like a metaphor for that feeling. And I took a lot of feedback on a lot of things. I don't think I ever asked anybody if they liked that tagline because I was pretty much set on it from the beginning. But I mean, I think that sort of goes to similar to what you were asking before and our answer to it, that a lot of this really was just an art project for us, right? Like that we weren't really calculating exactly what we thought would hit the market well or not, or exactly how we should engage through the comments or what's successful and what's not. The whole thing was we were going to make this game that we really wanted to make, and then present ourselves as a company in a way that we really wanted to do so, and just see, you know, just just see who that resonates with. So far, the response that we got was very heartening and encouraging.
Yeah, I was gonna say so it turns out that a lot of people really resonate with this message. And the campaign really just like blew up in a really great way when you launched on Kickstarter. What was it like on that, that first launch day for you? What were the
weird? That was so weird. It felt like constantly like it was a glitch. So we pressed launch, and I think like within like 4 seconds we already had like 5 backers or something like that. And it just sort of felt like that was a mistake. Like the whole campaign, the whole thing, it sort of felt like, well, okay, so we've exhausted our family and friends resources right on day one. So now we're gonna taper off. And people talked about that lull, and like it's really gonna die out mid campaign, and it kind of didn't. And there was just it felt like a surprise after a surprise, but then we were also sort of a little bit kind of waiting for that shoe to drop, that this was all not real. All these people were like hired to write in our comment section or something.
Yeah, it was surreal
weird
and confusing. And still, I mean, honestly, if we were to like write a big, like this is what we did, all we could say is what we did. We have no idea what actually was successful, what wasn't. We could learn in the future more from like, if we make more games and we'll try different things and stuff. But in this case, we know what we did, but we don't know exactly why it worked seemingly as well as it did. Because sometimes we'll sort of convince ourselves like, oh yeah, we did everything right. Like, yeah, but then other times we look at other campaigns that seem to do everything right also. And they have much more of a lull in the middle, and we try to get a sense, we communicated with our backers and stuff, but I mean, honestly, because Kickstarter doesn't allow you to get that great of data about where people come from and stuff, like we genuinely don't know where a lot of those backers came from. Right.
Yeah. And we also had no idea we had that level of support at the beginning. Like we had a mailing list and everything, but I was like, I don't know, maybe like 90% of those emails are going to people's promotion folder. We're getting open rates, but they're only okay. Like there were so many metrics by which we were like, I don't know, maybe we'll fund. Yeah, it was really weird.
Yeah, we really went into it just having no idea what to expect, and the idea that we could get like a little surge, and then there are some people on Instagram that said they would back, and we'll probably get those, and then what friends and family, and then just hit a point of like crickets of just struggling and promoting and trying to get one person to back it after another or something.
We were actually, before the campaign, we were counting. We were like, okay, so I have like 50 people in my friends and family network who said they're going to back it. And then we have these people who said they would buy it online, right? And then we have these people from PAX. We probably have like 10 from PAX, So we're like going through and counting. We're like, maybe we'll hit 300 backers. Like maybe, and then maybe Kickstarter will do the rest. Yeah, no clue that was what we had.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing we can really, the way to make sense of it is that seemingly people that were going to our Kickstarter page were converting at a really high rate. And why that is exactly would be something that we'd have to ask the backers, right? And we don't totally know.
Yeah. Well, this all seems like a very great surprise. I can like hear the surprise in both of your voices, and I kind of love it, right? Like sometimes you just don't know why things work, but they do. But I'd love to kind of touch on like what were you doing during the campaign, right? Were you kind of talking about it every single day? Were you kind of posting it in different places? Like what were you kind of doing to keep people kind of chatting about it?
So we were surprisingly busy pretty much the entire campaign. We thought that once we launched it, we'd have actually less time that we had to spend on Mantis Falls for a little bit. And that wasn't the case at all. Responding to comments took up a big chunk of our time. Dealing with Facebook ads and trying to make sense of what's working and what's not, and just sort of that whole interface of trying to make sure we're doing that right. Took a fair amount of time, and a big part of it also was just getting our stretch goals figured out, as because we had a plan of sort of how the stretch goals would work, but then we were going to change it based upon the rate of funding that we were getting and how the numbers are coming in. Like And so suddenly we were getting results that made us realize, like, we actually need to come up with a whole different tier of stretch goals than we were picturing. And that's, of course, very time consuming because we're trying to get manufacturing quotes on various possible upgrades. And
I spent probably about an hour, 2 hours every day messaging personally all of the backers with their names and everything, thanking them. If I recognized the backer, then I would, send them a message. But it ended up being something like, 500 people a day, like 120, between 120 and 400, depending on the day. And so that was a lot of sending, depending on the tier that they pledged at, and, writing them a message about when the print and play will be available, or thank you for backing our ally tier. Here's what you can expect. And then going through and making sure everybody was addressed by their name or their handle, to make sure they understand that they're, valuable to us. And, but I would say the stretch goals were probably the most time consuming because we were not prepared for that level of support.
And in the comments, we responded to every single comment, I think. And a lot of them would have pretty detailed questions about the mechanics of the game or how that would play out. And the commenters, like, it would also be framed sort of in like, I'm concerned about this. And so we took that very seriously. Like, we wanted to really make sure they understood the answer to how those design choices were made and why.
We did a few Discord
that's right.
playthroughs of the game on Tabletop Simulator, and the first one that we did, actually, a bunch of people got booted from the room because there were too many. We didn't realize that, I guess, the rooms can't go over 100 or over 50 or something like that, and so a bunch of people couldn't even join to watch the game. So then we scheduled more of those, and those were time consuming to schedule, put together, all of that kind of stuff. So there's definitely, I think, if we'd known how it was going to go, we would have taken a lot more time ahead of it all, to make sure that we knew, we were expecting, 300 people, and mostly in the United States. We didn't know. We ended up with 62 countries on the backing list. And so we didn't know what it was going to be like. Can we ship games to, we were in Cambodia. How do I get a game to Cambodia? And is it going to be, duties free, VAT friendly, like all that stuff? Like, I don't know how to answer those questions. So then it was a lot of addressing those kinds of things for backers. And so pretty wild.
Yeah, a lot of logistics stuff and people's concerns over shipping prices, and us trying to really make sure we had it pinned down in terms of how much VAT was going to cost. And yeah, but in terms of actually just engaging people, I mean, actually not a whole lot, really. Like,
people really did our work for us, like, on that front. They were asking questions. They were talking to each other in the comments. And we were very, very lucky for that. I mean, it could have been crickets in our comments, and we were like trying to, we did do some polls in the comments. So we asked people to vote on certain aspects of the game. And it was things that we wouldn't, like, we took somebody's advice. I forget who it was, but, don't offer an option you're not actually wanting to offer. So we offered options for what kind of art was going to be on our storage bags. And then we gave people 3 places to vote each time. And one would be, in the comments to keep our comments going. One would be in our, Facebook group. And then another would be on Instagram, on our comment there. And then the next time we would do it, you can vote on Reddit, you can vote on our Twitter, and you can vote on the comments. And so there was always, trying to send people to different resources where they can either gather new information or connect with us in a different way.
Wow. Yeah. There's actually I'm kind of taking notes through all this, and you guys are doing a lot. You were doing a lot throughout, responding to everyone individually, saying thank you and welcome, and telling them what to expect, all this, planning for stretch goals and commenting and doing all these polls. And there's a lot going on in the back end for sure. Like, beyond marketing, right? Beyond just the marketing questions, like, how did you do it all, the two of you?
It was probably about, depending on the day, somewhere between 8 and 12 hours work for 2 different people.
You mean during the Kickstarter campaign itself, or the whole thing?
Well, during the Kickstarter or even before Kickstarter, I know you were working on this for a long time too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's been the thing is we had to do so many different things, and it's kind of like like I said, we're not tax experts or like VAT experts or anything, and suddenly we're having to be in phone calls about that. But then like just making a website, like I've made websites before, but like never something that I would consider like professional quality. And it was like, okay, I have a month, I need to make a website. It needs to be professional quality. I need to do it in my evenings. And like making the video, we just sort of had to keep figuring out new skill sets, the whole way.
Fortunately, Adrian has a very good, is very, very speedy with technology, which is great. And then also has a great sense, like a great eye for things. So it really helps. I mean, I think if there weren't like the two of us, if this were just one person, this would have driven me crazy. But anything that I did, I could be like, am I crazy? Is this the right thing to do? I could throw it to him and he could say, yeah, that's good, or no, that's not great, And so that being able to bounce off of each other, one person take on the majority and then pitch it to the other was a big thing. But I mean, also we had, 5 years, right? We had 5 years to figure out all of the minutia of the game and the art and everything. And that was all no rush, for all of that. So that part leading up to it, but then during the campaign was probably, we definitely spent a lot of time every single day, and we were hustling the whole time. It was like everything as fast as you can possibly do it without mistakes.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because we were trying really to maintain a sense of professionalism in everything we were doing. But most of what we were doing, it was definitely the first time we'd ever done it. And it was usually something that we taught ourselves to do like the night before. Yeah. And that obviously takes a lot of time, like the learning curve and all of that. But I think the big thing that helped us get through that was that in this particular case, this game was such an interesting challenge to try to create in the first place. Like it really was this sort of real unique idea of like that it could potentially be difficult even if it's cooperative, but be challenging even if it's competitive. And we spent so long on that by the time we got to all of this other stuff, it was we didn't have to second guess ourselves too much about like why are we spending all this time on it. Like if we'd spent a year on the game and then we spent a year and a half trying to do all this other stuff, I could imagine there could really be points of like, oh my gosh, we're spending more time on this stuff than we spent even on the game design. The fact that we were so invested in the game by the time we began the process pushed us forward, I think. And it was just sort of, there was no second guessing it. It was like, we just got to do it. But even so, it's been awesome, but it was, in retrospect, it was quite a decision to make to like not really have any free time for
that's kind of like an understatement of the year,
Man, if we weren't working online right now,
yeah, for
the most part, like Adrian's a professor, I'm a teacher. If we weren't working our day jobs, online during COVID, I don't know how we would have. We got to actually be together in person all day long, so that every spare moment we could be, contacting manufacturers or contacting freight companies or, responding to emails. So that definitely saved us a decent bit of energy in this process.
Got it. And, from all of this, now that you're kind of through the other side, right? All the development, the play testing, gearing up for pre-launch, testing all this, like what kind of things would you let new game designers who have these same aspirations, kind of what kind of advice would you have for them?
I would say that if you are making a game to make money, that's for many reasons possibly not going to work out as well as you think it will. It's not as lucrative as it might seem on the out. Like a lot of people looked at our campaign and they were like, wow, your goal was 8,000. So what are you going to do with that extra, $175,000? And I was like, oh no, that's not how that works. Like, it's not just like money you get to pocket. This is pre-orders. But then, the amount of time that we invested in doing all of this and doing it right, I mean, if we were to get paid an hourly rate based on what we actually got from the Kickstarter, it would be, appalling. We did it because we loved it, and it's probably going to pay dividends in the very long term. If, like we want to make more games, we want to make expansions on this game. And so those things are probably going to pay out all that work that we did ahead of time. But, if people are thinking about Kickstarter as a way to, you have a game idea and you're just going to launch it and hopefully make some money off of it, I think that's maybe the wrong mentality to come in. I feel like you have to be a little bit crazy to go through this process. And I think you have to be really genuine about what you're doing and what you want from it. But
yeah, I mean, I would say, for me, as I sort of mentioned before, like this was a big looming thing on my life's to-do list to create art that actually felt like it existed in the world. And that was one of those things where I think if I'd gone my entire adult life without ever doing that, it would have just bothered me more and more and more and more. And so knowing that for myself, this was an attempt to address that. And having gotten through it, it's like it's the type of thing where the amount of time that we spent doesn't make sense to people. Like when you try to catch up with people and they like want to know what else is going on in your life, and it's just like this game thing took so much time, like you can't even imagine. But it makes sense for me because it was like this was a life's to-do list thing that was like incredibly important to me. And for people who feel that way, this is one really like a revelation in terms of the possibility to do that. That music and trying to write a novel, and there's all these things where you hope to maybe express yourself. And I've never found a more welcoming community than tabletop game design. Like that, whether this will always be the case or not, I'm not sure, but like the amount of people that are actually open and excited to see the creative projects of other people. And so this really could be the way for a lot of people to do that. And I would say if you're positive that that's important to you, then this is the best way I've ever found. If you're not, then it's maybe going to feel like more time and energy than it is worth.
I really like how you both kind of touched on kind of setting goals and setting the right goals for yourself too. Like for you, Adrian, like having this art, kind of art piece in the world was kind of one of your goals. Like, and Julie, you were saying about, don't launch a game just to make money. Like this is kind of a passion project for you and Adrian, right? Setting those goals for yourself and kind of having that bias towards action just to move forward. Because just even listening to you both talking about how the two of you kind of got through these few years, like doing all these things by yourself and then launching and just getting this overwhelming response. It was really, really just like refreshing to hear.
Thanks. Yeah, it's definitely been we were not a big part of the tabletop community as of 5 years ago. And the process of figuring out how to get this game into the world sort of brought us into it. And not necessarily because we needed to market to people, but like we needed to understand how to do this. So we met the guys from Keymaster Games who have been amazing. They introduced us to other game designers. Those game designers recommended a Facebook group of supportive people who are also launching games. Those people connected us with reviewers. The reviewers then connected us with their communities. And it just sort of like fell downhill like that, where everybody just wants everyone else to create something great because there's not that much competition, right? It's not like you only buy one game. And then the whole community is always just like starving for new and exciting things coming down the pipeline. And they're proud for you if you can do that. And so it just, the support, the general positivity in this whole group, it's pretty endearing. And having not been in it 5 years ago to getting into that and seeing what, that these like complete strangers just want the best for you and are excited to share this thing with you. I mean, I would say it's pretty like reaffirming of humanity in general.
It's a really nice culture that we found of tabletop gamers.
Yeah. So from here, what's next for you both? Well, where are you launching another game? Are you working on something completely new, something an expansion? Like what's next?
So to be honest, when we hit a day where we don't have anything left to do for Mantis Falls, we'll probably take one day off. I think is the first thing that would be nice. But moving forward, there's certainly expansions that we've already had pretty thorough thoughts of sort of how it would work. So we'd be excited to do that. We have like 7 other games that are in various stages of their sort of imaginations and development. We haven't pinned down which of those might move to the forefront next. We'll probably do an expansion, I think, first. Right now, I'm working on the soundtrack for Mantis Falls, which is one of the stretch goals, and that'll be another creative endeavor related to that.
I'm finishing up the art for the interior of the box. So one of the things that we promised was, and I don't think we even necessarily said in the campaign it was going to be a map, but I'm basically creating the whole map of what Mantis Falls, the city, looks like, which is going to, I think, be a fair bit of world building that can then will help with expansions later on.
Yeah, but I think in general, I mean, it's certainly been really great to create this, and we want to keep this as part of our lives. We'll see what happens, when we plant sort of the seed of this game all around the world now. Once we get this produced, see what the response is, see if people are looking for an expansion, try to gauge what the audience might be for us to make something brand new. Certainly have ideas that we're excited about, but sort of have to see where it goes, I guess.
But I would say that if at any point, we didn't feel like this was a genuine venture anymore, if it was like we have a business and we have to release another game this year, I think it would quickly tire for both of us.
Oh yeah, and also I think the speed that we made Mantis Falls at, any product we make will probably be similarly slow, I would imagine. Like, the reason we fell in love with Mantis Falls the way we did was because we, from the very beginning, decided that it was never going to be done until it was actually really, really, really done. And so that could take years potentially for the next one to come. But yeah, we're excited. I mean, it's after being in this world of Mantis Falls so incredibly thoroughly, it's exciting to think about like this time next year working on a whole different world that we could create.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people are just kind of waiting on the edge of their seat just to get this game into their hands and also kind of see where you both take the world from now on too. Thank you so much for coming on the show and just sharing all these insights about the campaign, about working together, about just dreaming up this project and making it happen, and also about the marketing aspects of it too. I know people are going to love what you have to say. If people want to get in touch or kind of find out more about Mantis Falls and get a copy of themselves, where should they go?
If they're interested in buying a game, GameFound right now we're accepting pre-orders, and it's at our same, it's the $29. So once it goes to market, it'll be full MSRP, but we're still discounting for all the folks who are willing to pre-order it.
If they go to mantisfalls.com, MantisFalls, Mantis Falls, that'll redirect them. They can just click a link there, and it'll direct them to the GameFound site, so they can pre-order a copy there. And I guess, should we give it our email address or something?
So info@distantrabbitgames.com is our email address. And honestly, we're, as much as we can, we're not experts at this, but, I know most of the folks who are listening to this are also into board games. If there's anything I can do with the information I've learned over the last year of, like, how does it work when you ship internationally, or, who do you ship with, or, like, what about creating a Kickstarter page? How does, Facebook ads work? I'm so glad to share as much information as I can with anyone who needs it. So if anybody wants to reach out, like if anybody's working on their own project, I would just be very glad that all of that time and energy could be distributed as thoroughly as possible. So if anyone needs advice or wants to talk more one-on-one about the process that they're going through, I don't pitch myself as an expert in any sense, but really glad to help out in any way I can.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for being on here and for sharing all of this. I know people are probably going to really clamor to reach out to you both.
Thanks. Yeah, well, thanks a lot for having us.
And that wraps up our episode today. If you found what we talked about today helpful in any way, please be sure to leave a review to help others find this podcast. And most importantly, if you're feeling that fire and you're ready to get started on your Kickstarter campaign, be sure to head to the show notes of the podcast. I've linked some of my resources that others have used to successfully launch and get funded. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Board Game Marketing Podcast. For daily tips and advice, find us in the Board Game Marketing group on Facebook. See you next week.